Today, I'm going to give you the 10 worst foods to eat if you're diabetic. Diabetes is a chronic medical condition that affects the way your body converts food into energy. Be sure to watch my video on diabetes symptoms after you finish watching this video. 1 in 10 people in the United States has diabetes, and more than 1 in 3 have prediabetes. A very important part of managing that diabetes is understanding which foods are beneficial to your condition versus which foods to avoid. So today we're going to talk about foods to avoid as I give you the 10 worst foods to eat if you're diabetic. Breakfast cereals. If you have diabetes and you think that eating a breakfast cereal is a healthy way to start your day, please think again, because breakfast cereals can be very unhealthy. Now, if you're listening to me, you might be thinking, Dr. Frieda, not me, because my breakfast cereal says fat-free. Well, guess what? When manufacturers make things that are fat-free and they label it in really big letters, they're doing it to advertise that the food is healthy, or at least to make you think that. But if they take away the fat out of your cereal, they still have to make it taste good, right? So you'll eat it. So what do? They replace it with sugars. In fact, some of these breakfast cereals have as high as 25% sugar. Go ahead, look at your label, be a label watcher. What you want to do when you have diabetes is have foods with low sugar. You want to stick to a breakfast that has high protein and low carbs. Breakfast cereals are loaded down with carbohydrates and sugars, and they have low protein and low fiber usually. So eating a breakfast cereal is one of the worst foods you can eat if you're diabetic. And go ahead and look at the labels of instant oatmeal, because that's not good for you either. Barbecue sauce. It is with a heavy heart that I report that if you have diabetes, barbecue sauce is one of the worst foods you can eat. Let me explain, because I know barbecue sauce seems pretty benign, and I'm from the South. I love barbecue. But let's just say you have your diabetes and you're trying to have a lean lunch, and so you prepare a chicken breast with white meat, no skin. Well, in order to spice up the flavor a little bit, you decide to add some barbecue sauce. Well, if you add 1 tablespoon of barbecue sauce, that's 7 grams of sugar. But you know you're going to do more than just 1 tablespoon, so if you add 2 tablespoons of barbecue sauce, that's 14 grams of sugar, which already is about half of the daily recommended sugar that you should take in. This high sugar is not good for your diabetes. It will spike your blood sugar and cause you to be a poorly managed diabetic. And so if you have diabetes, barbecue sauce, as well as other prepackaged sauces like tomato sauces or even salad dressings, these are among the worst foods you could eat. French fries. White potatoes are already a starchy vegetable, which is somewhat of a nightmare for diabetes. But when you take that potato, you slice it up, you fry it in oils, especially oils with trans fats, and then you load it up with salt, well, this is definitely a food that you want to avoid. If you simply must have a French fry, try a healthier option like sweet potato fries. Slice up the sweet potato, put some oil, like an olive oil, on the sweet potato, and put them in the oven. White breads and pasta. Eating white breads and pasta can be like eating candy in some ways because they're loaded down with sugars and they have very little protein and fiber. So when you eat white bread, when you eat instant noodles, or when you eat white pasta, this is definitely bad for your diabetes. What you want to do is change to whole grains. So you want to use whole grain breads and whole grain pastas. And you definitely want to avoid bagels because some bagels can have 45 grams of carbs. Ezekiel bread is something to try because it has some protein and some fiber, and it's definitely better as far as helping to prevent you from having the spikes in blood sugar. Also, if you're eating white rice, change to brown rice or try quinoa. Either way, white breads and pastas are some of the worst foods you can eat if you're diabetic. Potatoes. If you have diabetes, you want to avoid potatoes and other starchy vegetables. 1 white potato can have 40 grams of carbohydrates and only 4 grams of fiber. And so if you simply must have a potato, try to use a sweet potato as a healthier choice. Energy drinks. If you have diabetes, then you know that exercising is another way to help to manage your diabetes. But if you are drinking sports energy drinks to get your boost of energy before you exercise, please rethink that one. Rethink it, because most of these energy drinks are loaded down with sugar. And a lot of them have that high fructose corn syrup, which is one of the worst additions that you can put in a food product. So go ahead, yes, look at that label. 1 bottle of an energy drink will often have 32 grams of sugar, which is more than the daily recommended maximum sugar intake for the average woman in the US. Instead of the energy drink, just drink water. You can squeeze a little lemon in it, but if you have diabetes, then you do want to avoid these high sugar containing energy drinks. Dried fruit and fruit snacks. Now this one might surprise you, but just because a food says fruit does not mean that it's healthy. So when you're dealing with fruit snacks, for example, they're advertised and they look like they might be healthy, but look at that label. They have very high added sugar. If you have diabetes, you want to avoid them. So then you think, okay, well, dried fruit, that's pretty natural, that's not so bad. The issue with dried fruit is that it's very concentrated. And so you're ending up getting more and more sugar in a small amount. Take grapes, for example. 1 cup of grapes has about 27 grams of sugar. Well, if you have the dried fruit version, raisins, well, now 1 cup has 145 grams of sugar. That's more than 4 times the daily recommended sugar for a man. And so you have to be careful when you have this dried fruit because, again, it has more concentrated sugars, so you're taking in more sugar, which certainly can spike your blood sugar levels and be bad for your diabetes. If you want fruit, stick with whole fruits like pears or apples because they are loaded with fiber and nutrients, and eat the skin as well. You want to avoid fruits that have a high glycemic index, like bananas. Watch out for fruit juices as well, because with fruit juice, you have the juice, but you don't have the fiber. And so having a cup of fruit juice can spike your blood sugar as well. Fried chicken. I don't have to tell you that. You already know that fried chicken is one of the worst things you can eat if you're diabetic. I know it tastes good, but it's not good for you. Fried chicken has a lot of sodium, which is not good. It also is fried. And so if it's fried in oils, especially oils with all kinds of trans fats, that's something that can worsen diabetes. Now, the trans fats in and of themselves don't directly increase your blood sugar, but high trans fats can increase insulin resistance. They can increase belly fat. They can lower your HDL. In other words, they can lower the cholesterol that we consider a good cholesterol. So you want to avoid fried chicken along with other fried foods if you have diabetes. Oh, and if you're looking at labels, how do you know if something has trans fats in it? If the label has partially hydrogenated, avoid it. Flavored coffee. Listen, I know everyone loves flavored coffee. You like to walk around with your different cups and your lattes and your frappuccinos and all of these things. But if you have diabetes, you want to be careful about the flavored coffee that you drink because a lot of them are loaded down with sugar. And these are liquid calories. You won't even get full from them, but you'll be sitting there spiking your blood sugar. Just one typical cup of a flavored coffee can have 60 grams of sugar or more. And so if you do have coffee, then you want to make sure that you have coffee that has very low added sugars. Watch the label. And if you're at a coffee shop, ask them how much added sugar is in the product. Soda, or pop, depending on where you're from, is another thing that diabetics should avoid because when you have soda that has sugar in it, one 12-ounce can of soda can have 32 to even up to 40 grams of sugar. And again, these liquid calories can be really bad trouble for diabetics because you drink a soda and then guess what? You're thirsty for more, you're thirsty for more. So you're taking in calories, you're taking in sugar, and having this sugar can lead to weight gain. Also, some of the sugar can be processed by the liver and turned into fat. And so it's all a problem. So if you have diabetes, you want to avoid these sodas that have sugar. So